This week on London Real, we have Ironman triathlete, Spartan racer, and best-selling author, Ben Greenfield.
The only thing that gets me towing the line, it's beating people. I want to know one thing about my body every day: heart rate variability. I've always been driven. I want to have a human body that is primed. We are innate endurance animals. If you just want to say go out and do an Ironman, it turns out that if you're a relatively fit person, you can just go out and do one. People who are fit on the outside and look really good in spandex or Speedo or whatever on the outside, they're dying on the inside. Measure, relax, de-stress.
London Real presents Ben Greenfield, Extreme Endurance.
You do that hard thing first, and then you do it consistently.
This week on the show, we have Ironman triathlete, professional Spartan racer, and best-selling author, Mr. Ben Greenfield. Ben is a very unique individual. He is also a biohacker extraordinaire. He just spoke at the biohacking conference with Dave Asprey out in LA, where Dan Pena was as well, the $50 billion man. We'll talk about that later. But Ben is a fascinating guy who's got his entire property in Oregon set up kind of like a Spartan race, where he throws spears and climbs obstacles, and he really takes this seriously. He also takes the hacking of his entire biology seriously. He's run tests where he competed in a triathlete Ironman in Hawaii with no training whatsoever, and blogged about the entire experience and what worked and what didn't work. So it's fascinating having Ben in the studio. He really is the real deal. He is a complete athlete, all the way down to the shorts and training gear that he showed up in for the interview. But I'm a big fan. You know, Ben creates a piece of content every single day of his life. And I think that's a lot of people can learn from that out there when they're always asking, you know, what they can do, you know, to set up their own business or their own site. You know, Ben's been doing this since he was a young man. So it's not like this is a sudden success for him. So it's a great episode. He also talks about doing the civilian Navy SEAL training camp for like a week right near my hometown in Del Mar, San Diego, and what that experience was like. And afterwards, how he said nothing scares him after doing that training. Everything else is going to be easy compared to that hell that he was put through. So it's a fantastic show. He also counts guys like Tai Lopez as his mentors, and I ended up hanging out with him and Alex Icon later that night. So he rolls with good company. So I think you're really going to enjoy it, and definitely go to his website, watch his videos. It's fantastic to see Ben out there jumping in waters and throwing spears and all that good stuff. So you're definitely going to enjoy this. I'm walking down the very colorful Great Eastern Street here in Shoreditch in London. It's called Great Eastern Street based on the Great Eastern Railroad that was built around here in the 1850s. It's funny, I've actually got a map at home from the 1851 World's Fair here in Hyde Park, where there is no Great Eastern Street on the map. So this was made later when the rails came through. It's a fascinating story. I could bore your mind about it, but that's what we're walking through today. I just wanted to ask you a question or make a statement. You know, you never get a second chance to make a first impression, and online, that's your website. And that's why, in my opinion, it has to be absolutely slamming. You know, the tech firms around here know that when people show up to their website, they have to know quickly and efficiently and beautifully what they're doing, what their product is, and get them interested right away. And that's why we at London and Silicon Reel use the folks at Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to create your website or online portfolio, and they've just launched Squarespace 7, which has 15 beautiful designs you can choose from based on what you're trying to do, whether it's a product or a blog or whatever. And you know, I can't say enough about these guys. They make it super easy for all sorts of their users, including one of their free climbers, Alex. I posted a video. He has his website up there as well. So you can go in, I think for as little as $8 a month, you can get started. You can even build your own website without a credit card. So check that out. You can use the code LONDON for a 10% savings. And what can I say? They support everything we do here. So we want to support them and give them a shout out as well. So there you go. I know you've all been enjoying the $50 billion man. You know, this episode was almost 3 hours, and I really didn't know how it was going to be received. I didn't even know if you guys would even bother clicking on a 3-hour-long video, but the response has been huge. It's just gotten so many views and so many comments, and Dan personally goes in and replies to every single comment on YouTube like 150 times so far. Every 2 days he goes in. So if you want to ask him something, go to the YouTube clip right now and leave a question for him, and he'll come back and answer it for you. And the reason you know it's Dan is because he types in all fucking caps, and that's really him. Someone on YouTube was like, oh, that's not Dan. No, it is Dan. That's what Dan does. And all of his reports to me and all of his comments on my progress are in all caps, except they're in red on my email. He can't do red on YouTube. And so that's Dan. That's the real deal. I had a wonderful time up there. And it's hard work being having Dan as your mentor, because nothing's good enough. And that's the way it should be. So I'm probably wasting time right now talking to you when I should be back in the office doing some business, making some phone calls. So yeah, thanks so much for watching the Dan Show. Please share it with a friend. Let me know. This is going to be one of our all-time great shows. I'm sure it's going to tick up to 100,000 views. I'm positive. So thanks so much for that. I had a great time filming it, and it's just one of the wonderful perks of this show is that once or twice a year I get to meet someone that actually changes my life. So I have you guys to thank for that, and I really appreciate, you know, whether it's meeting someone like Dave Asprey a year or two ago, or going on the Joe Rogan show, or meeting Dan Pena. Yeah, just so many great things happen. So big appreciation to them. Speaking of Dave Asprey, as you know, I personally, my body is sponsored by the folks at Bulletproof. If you've been sleeping in a cave for the past few years, you won't know that Bulletproof is a coffee that's free of molten toxins. You mix it up with grass-fed butter and some MCT oil or brain octane oil, and it makes a wonderful brew, a coffee that I have every day in the morning. And it's a way I start my day. I've also been knocking back their Unfair Advantage, which is a new formula for, I think, mitochondria production. You can ask Ben Greenfield about that. And I knocked one of those ampules back in the morning, and I've been loving it. So big fans of their products. The Bulletproof Diet Book is coming out very soon. You can still pre-order it with like 2 weeks left. Pre-order a copy for yourself, for your family, and you can get those 9 free videos only for the next 2 weeks. So do that, send them your email, and they'll give you those free videos, and then it's going to be out. The diet's going to be amazing. So big fans of everything they do. Dan Pena was sucking down the Bulletproof coffee up at Guthrie Castle, so you know it's good. So big thanks to Dave Asprey, the Bulletproof exec. And there you go. It's been a fun walk. I thought it might be a little loud. You got some graffiti across the streets. Definitely get your ass to London, and you can appreciate this fantastic city. Very lucky to live here and to name my show after it as well. So more exciting things coming up, more things to announce as far as what's going on with the show and what the Pena changes will be. But until then, thanks so much for watching. Please share this video, tell a friend about it, download us on the audio podcast in case you don't want to look at us every week, and send me guest ideas, Brian at londonreal.tv. Also go to the gear section on our website, buy a hoodie. They're super warm and super wonderful, especially in these winter months. Everyone loves the hoodies. I love them too. And again, it really does support the show. So there you go. Now I leave you with Ironman triathlete, Spartan racer, best-selling author, Mr. Ben Greenfield. Let's do this. Here we go. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Mr. Ben Greenfield, who is an ex-bodybuilder, Ironman triathlete, Spartan racer, coach, speaker, and author of the New York Times Bestseller, Beyond Training, Mastering Endurance, Health, and Life. In 2008, Ben was voted the NSCA's Personal Trainer of the Year, and in 2013, you were named as one of the top 100 most influential people in health and fitness. Ben, welcome to London Real.
Hey, thanks, man. Thanks.
Hey,
I'm digging the city. I literally just was over in Hyde Park. You have awesome parks here.
Yeah.
And I ran over there.
And they're green as hell.
Did my bodyweight workout. So I have this little app on my phone. It's this I've never read about it. I don't know how it wound up on my phone, but it's called a Safari Fit app, and it's just a bunch of body weight moves that you do. So when I go to a new town, I find the nearest park, and I just open up a workout on that app, and it's like cheetah leaps and bird crawls and leopards and just a bunch of exercises named after animals with an ungodly amount of repetitions, which is why I like it. It's just body weight exercise to complete failure. And then you run back to your hotel room.
There you go.
That's a good way to go.
The parks here are amazing. I hope you get a chance to see them all. Whenever we have kind of fitness and nutrition experts come through, like we had Kelly Starrett here and Mike Dolce, I always ask them the same question when they first get here. When you think of the UK or when you come to the UK, how do you rate us, or what do you think when you think of fitness and nutrition? And you can be brutally honest.
I can. Yeah. Like I spoke this morning to a group of execs at a hotel. And man, there is a lot of sugar here. Like there's a lot of starches, there's a lot of sugar. Like there's seems to be an awareness of like the whole gluten-free thing.
Slowly
but there's still just, I would say that, if the American diet is based off of government subsidy of corn and grain and a food pyramid, or what's now a food plate that's based off of like a 50 to 60% carbohydrate based diet, I think you guys may have us edged out as far as that carbohydrate percentage goes.
Okay. I thought with all the high fructose corn syrup in the U.S., it might be edging us out, but no.
Yeah, honestly, high fructose corn syrup, white rice, fruit smoothies made with apples and pears, like all that stuff is going to spike your blood sugar the same. So it's just a different kind of carb. I would say that's the major thing that I've noticed, just because I've been trying to hit a lot of the healthy little food stores here, like Avocado and Pret, and like these little one-stop shops. And it's cool that they've got a lot of these healthy foods available, but they're still kind of fat phobic, right? Like you still see low fat, fat free.
Right. Okay.
And I am, obviously you're drinking the coffee with the fats in it. I'm a huge fan of basically traveling with MCT oil and just drenching what you're eating in fats.
Right. I think that movement is coming slow over here. Obviously we're leading the charge. I'm drinking some bulletproof coffee here. It's a little late in the evening, so Ben passed. But I've obviously have my MCT and brain octane oil and butter every morning.
I would take it if I had theanine capsules, because theanine will balance out the caffeine and allow you to sleep if you take theanine at the same time.
Okay.
So that's something you can add in, or you should add into your bulletproof coffee, or you could do bulletproof green tea.
Right.
That's another way to get theanine and caffeine combined.
Okay. So when it comes to the UK, you still see some diet choices that are like, not quite sure about that. And I'm with you. They typically go with the bacon roll is kind of the UK go-to. There's still the croissants that are around, that kind of thing. I would say that the portion sizes seem smaller to me than say in America, but
Yeah. See, portion sizes don't get to me, because I like my portion sizes big. For me, it's just about the macros, right?
Okay.
If I'm having a big plate, like, at my hotel room every morning the past few days, I order up an omelet, like a 3-egg omelet, but I have them leave the bread off the side, leave the jam, leave the juice, and I get smoked salmon on the side of the omelet.
Okay. And
then I can drench that in MCT or olive oil, and it's a pretty good meal.
Okay, and as far as London, are we aware of fitness here, or are you kind of more of a novelty? When people are like, oh
yeah, it's super fit city. People are walking.
There's a lot of that.
I was at the park, and people were like, I was in the park yesterday morning doing yoga, and people were like running all over the place with backpacks on, and I assume they're running to work.
Yeah, that's a British thing. Yeah,
and that they somehow are taking a shower when they get there, and running home. Lots of bicyclists, a lot of gyms. Like I've been going to this box that was next door to my hotel called Gym Box.
Yeah, Gym Box.
Really crazy. They've got like a DJ there.
Yeah.
So you're working out.
Covent Garden? Is that
a lot of CrossFitters, a lot of kettlebells. They've got a ring there for fighting. A couple racks, some good platforms for powerlifting, but. Yeah, really, really weird, because it's like you're in a nightclub lifting weights, and it's loud, like you can't hear yourself think, because this DJ is spinning tunes.
It's kind of a strange. Is that the one in Covent Garden or not?
It was near Covent Garden.
Near Covent Garden, yeah. I think it used to be a movie theater or something. It's like
it felt like a nightclub or movie theater.
Yeah, that's a kind of an anomaly for the UK, but there's a lot of gyms here. People do think about it. This is a huge walking city, so you don't get that whole stuck in the car, for a few hours. So, for people that don't know much about you, I just kind of want to go through your specialty so they kind of know who they're talking to. I believe your specialties are achieving grueling feats of performance while still maintaining optimized hormones and biomarkers, marrying ancestral living to modern biohacking, and maximizing digestion, brain, and sleep quality. Because you do a lot of things. You do some ultra serious endurance training, and you also are, hugely into biohacking. I know you just spoke at the Bulletproof Biohacking Conference, and you had like five tips, I think, that you were talking about, or 5 concepts that kind of turned you into a beast. I want to talk about some of your endurance stuff. I know also that you did an Ironman with like 2 weeks notice without training. Actually, I want to hear about that first.
A couple of weeks ago. That was interesting.
Was it really? So tell me about the Ironman. You didn't have much time to prepare, and then this was one of those hardcore Ironmans, right?
Yeah, so this was the Ironman World Championships, right? Like this was the Super Bowl of triathlon, the one that you see on NBC every year, the Kona on the lava fields of Hawaii, just one of the most brutal courses on the face of the planet, one of the most grueling Ironman triathlons that you can do. And up until last year, I was pretty hardcore into triathlon. Like I'd done Ironman triathlons and was like a top-ranked amateur triathlete, and was just big time into triathlon, coaching triathletes, using my exercise physiology geekery to figure out how to get the most out of triathlon, how to do it in a healthy way, like you just alluded to. But then I stopped.
Okay, the Ironman is the hardest of the triathlons, right?
Ironman is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and then a marathon for dessert.
Okay.
So
and approximate times.
Finish up with the marathon. So you'll see the really, really fast guys, like the pros who are winning it, go anywhere from like 8:20 to 8:45, sometimes 9 hours.
Okay.
When I was competing, I was generally between about a 9:25 and a 9:45. So I was moving along pretty fast, but then I just quit. Like I did my 10th race, Ironman Hawaii, and I was done. And didn't really want to do triathlon anymore. Didn't want to stare at the black line at the bottom of the pool and ride my bike for hours every weekend, and felt like or feel pressured, right, to maintain enough fitness to run a marathon at the drop of a hat,
right?
Because that gets draining after a while. Just
How many
like that
years,
chronic, repetitive motion.
Right. How many years had you been preparing for Ironmans?
Oh, I raced for 8 years. I raced hardcore, and I'm actually still on Team Timex, which is a global elite triathlon team. And so I'm contracted to do a certain amount of racing each year. But as far as like the big long Ironman stuff, I was done.
It just got to you.
And there are other things I wanted to do. So I got into obstacle racing. Okay. I want to be one of the top Spartan and obstacle racing athletes on the planet before I'm 40. So I decided I wanted to take a few years to really focus on the fact that I don't have the slow twitch muscle capacity to be a pro Ironman triathlete, like a really good one. But this whole obstacle racing thing where you've got power, speed, endurance, balance, flexibility, coordination, you get muddy and dirty and you're carrying heavy things and then running and then crawling under barbed wire and swimming through muddy ponds. I love it. Okay. And I got into that as soon as I dropped out Ironman.
Okay.
In the past 8 months, I've done, I think, 11 Spartan races.
Okay.
So.
And the Ironman, I'm curious. So you finished that 10th one, and you were just like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Your brain was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. Maybe it wasn't the challenge anymore. And
yeah,
it must be pretty monotonous. But that also is part of the brain game, right?
It's that, and also so you've got your athletic career, right? And generally for endurance, you look at the best endurance athletes in the world, they're topping out anywhere from 36 to 40 years old, right? Like Lance Armstrong, and if you're looking at Ironman, guys like Craig Alexander and Chris McCormick, and any of these guys that are doing grueling feats of endurance, you get to a point where you've got that ultimate combination of slow twitch muscle capacity, knowledge about how to fuel, knowledge about how to pace, knowledge of your own body, and you generally see a peak in those sports that comes later than the peak that you see in things like MMA, jiu-jitsu, football, power and explosive sports that rely on fast twitch muscle and high levels of testosterone. So in stepping back and looking at my own athletic career, I decided that I wanted to choose a sport where I could still be really good, like be one of the top dogs, and I didn't see myself getting there with triathlon.
Okay.
Just with my body type.
Fair enough. How old are you?
I'm 32. 32.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's an intelligent choice.
So I moved. So I got this text message 2 weeks before Ironman Triathlon from Team Timex, and it was basically a text message that said, "Do you want to race Ironman?" And I didn't know this, but Timex, because it's the oldest running sponsor of the Ironman race in Hawaii, they're given like this slot that they can give away, and people try for years to get to this race, right?
Okay.
People bid $30,000 to $40,000 on eBay to even be able to get into this race as like a non-qualifier.
Okay.
It's a very, very tough race to get into. So getting a text message offering you a slot into the race was kind of a big deal. And I had just finished racing Spartan World Championships literally the day before, so I felt like invincible, right? I'd just finished this super duper tough race, and I was like, sure, let's do it. Throw it at me.
Right.
So I had 2 weeks to prepare for an Ironman. And my original goal was to just swim, bike, and run a lot, right? And just rebuild those nervous system pathways as quickly as possible. And I realized, so I track my nervous system every morning.
Okay.
So I measure what's called heart rate variability.
Yeah, Dave's a big fan of that.
If you could measure anything, like if you could self-quantify with any one variable, and you're going to skip the blood test, you're going to skip the gut test, you've got whatever, limited resources, limited time, and you're just like, I want to know one thing about my body every day, heart rate variability is the way to do it.
Okay.
So I wake up every morning, I put on a little Bluetooth chest strap. It's the only time that I'll wear Bluetooth and self-quantification devices all day, just because I'm not a fan of having like low-level electrical signals or high-level signals like Wi-Fi routers and cell phones and stuff like that constantly on my body or on around me during the day.
Okay.
But this one time when I wake up, and this is the time that you're supposed to do it, I do this heart rate variability measurement. So I put on the chest strap, turn on my phone. I use an app called Sweetbeat,
Okay.
and it measures the strength of your sympathetic, your fight or flight nervous system, right? How beat up that is or how primed and prepared it is, and then your parasympathetic nervous system.
And it does
which
that
is
just by monitoring
your
your
rest and
your
digest.
heartbeat.
Well, it's monitoring your heartbeat, but more specifically, it's monitoring the amount of time that's spent between each heartbeat, right?
Okay.
Like the delta in your heart rate or your heart rate variability.
Right, okay.
And what should happen is that should fluctuate, like tiny millisecond fluctuations from beat to beat. And if it does, that shows that there's good robustness in your nervous system, good interplay between your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system.
Okay.
So it's a very, very good way to not only get like green light, yellow light, red light, right? Like train today, go easy today, kind of hold back today, but it's also a good way to see how the previous day's training or your previous day's diet or maybe some kind of nutrient or supplement you took that night to help you get to sleep, like how that is affecting your nervous system the next day.
Okay. Do you do anything? Do you try to concentrate or calm yourself down while you're doing it, or do you just lay down and let it run for a few minutes?
I generally don't. I don't try and hack it to get it higher because I want a true measurement of where it's at.
Right.
There are things that you can do. As a matter of fact, that the number one thing that you can do from a breathing standpoint is alternate left-right nostril breathing. Like if you want to increase your heart rate, and that's where you breathe in, you plug your right nostril,
Okay.
and you breathe in through your left nostril, and then you move over and you plug your left nostril and you breathe out through your right nostril.
Okay.
It's a very, very good way to calm yourself.
You can't do it without your finger, though, right? You're not. I thought you were about to do it.
It's,
Like
you could, if you were like a free diver or something like that, you could probably figure it out without your finger. But it's a very, very good way to calm yourself. There are other things that you can do, like what's called quick coherence technique, which is where you think of something that's really meaningful to you, right? Like your kids or your pet or your lover or something that's very meaningful, and you close your eyes and you imagine that being in your heart. Like you visualize that and place it into your heart and breathe as you do it. And it sounds really woo-woo and airy-fairy, but if you watch your heart rate variability as you do that while you're hooked up to a device like this, you can
Right.
see it go up.
okay. And going up is good.
Going up is good. You want your
Okay.
heart rate variability to
Okay.
be high.
All right, so you want it to kind of do a short
your
beat
heart
and a long
rate,
beat.
Yeah, your resting heart rate in most cases should be low. If it drops really low, that usually you're overtrained. But in most cases, like the lower that it gets, the fitter that you are. And the higher that it gets, usually that's a sign that you might be overtraining or digging yourself into a training hole or stressed out or something like that. Or maybe just not fit, right? You don't have enough blood volume. But I started doing the swimming and the biking and the running to get myself ready, right?
Yeah,
Like
2
I
weeks.
got total panic training, right? I got to swim, I got to bike, got to run. And my heart rate variability was just plummeting, you know. And what happens is when it plummets, if it stays low for several days, you can guarantee you're going to get injured during that day's workout or you're going to get sick or both.
And that
So-
happens with a high correlation that you found.
Oh yeah, I mean
Okay.
it's like
You know your body
the,
well.
The athletes, the clients that I coach, they send me that data every day. There's an export feature on the app that they use, and I literally have an email inbox set up for each client, and that comes in as it's basically like an Excel spreadsheet. So you can pull it up. You can look at low frequency,
high frequency, and those are measurements of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system.
Okay.
And then overall heart rate variability.
So if you see that coming, you should get some sleep, get some rest, eat, watch your diet, and not train.
Sleep, rest, like omission and commission. Like the number one thing, I've tested a lot of things. Sex the night before definitely increases it. That's a great hormonal and nervous system stabilizer. One thing that I've found to vastly decrease it, just plummets, is antihistamines. A lot of people use things like Benadryl and stuff like that for
in the
allergies.
summer and everything.
Just plummets heart rate variability.
Okay.
So you start to figure out the things that your nervous system really responds well to and responds poorly to. And it helps advise you on your training too, because you can see, okay, I do really good with heavy lifting, right? Like 3 days a week, but once I start to go 4 or 5, my heart rate variability stays consistently low.
Okay, so that's the one metric if people can do.
It's a really good metric,
That's
and
the
it's
best one.
easy,
Yeah,
right? It's like you got to buy whatever, a Bluetooth heart rate monitor chest strap is like $50 to $70 US. And then the app's it's like $10.
And
so
you set it up for a couple minutes and just kind of lay down.
3 to 5 minutes. 5 minutes is ideal. If you can make it 5 minutes, so it takes 3 minutes to get a good heart rate variability score.
Okay.
It takes 5 minutes for that parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system to actually stabilize, right? Where it's not bouncing around. So 5 minutes is good.
Okay. So what happened with the training? What
Okay,
did
so,
you do?
So
you
I
saw
was
that-
like, well, crap, this is not going to work. I can't do this. So I just shifted into full on, what I call putting work into the body without actually working the body. So every morning, yoga, right? Like deep breathing, movement, opening up the hips, did a lot of stuff. I know you've had Kelly Starrett out on the show. So like foam roller and lacrosse ball and a lot of the stuff that he talks about in his Supple Leopard book.
Yeah.
I think he calls it goat herding, right? Where you just find all these little spots on your body that are tight or painful. And I would literally just put a podcast or some music on and just go to town on my body. So I do yoga, I did soft tissue work, and that was how I'd start my morning. And in the afternoon, I'd do things that would get blood flowing, but that weren't damaging to the body. Sauna is a really good one. Just basically sitting in a sauna, you get production of heat shock proteins, you get a really, really good cardiovascular response. It moves lymph fluid around, it moves blood flow around, but there's no joint impact. Right? So you're not really draining your nervous system that dramatically. Cold exposure, same thing. I'm a big fan of cold thermogenesis. So I do long cold showers. I'll sit in a cold bath, do cold soaks. At my house, and I actually had a crane come up and deliver this big, long 19-foot endless swimming pool. Right, so it's got these jets that push against you as you're swimming or moving or walking or floating in the water. And I've got that set at 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So really, really cold pool that I can just sit in and float in or tread water in. But that's a great way to get blood flowing. And it's a great way to improve your cardiovascular capacity and put work into your body. And you can combine that with the heat as well if you want to go back and forth.
Okay.
But these type of things are things that you can do to train your body without actually training.
And how well does that work? Because you'd think, okay, if you're not actually biking or swimming or running or getting the heart rate up really high, can you get 50% of the effect? Or
you get what's called mitochondrial biogenesis. All right, so anytime that you're doing something that causes your body to, for example, produce nitric oxide, which is what cold exposure and heat exposure do, like that produces what's called endothelial nitric oxide. It opens up capillaries, it opens up vessels, it causes vasodilation, increased glucose and oxygen delivery to muscle tissue. When you do that, you drive a genetic response to make more mitochondria, which is what you're going to actually rely upon. The mitochondria are your cell's powerhouses that produce ATP. If you've got increased density of your mitochondria, that enables you to go longer, to go harder, to go faster. There are different ways you can hack that pathway. You can go out and do voluminous exercise at low intensities for long periods of time. That's like the Kenyan marathoner approach. And that approach works as long as you're not pushing yourself too hard during those long, slow sessions. That's called polarized training. You see a lot of people like cross-country skiers, Tour de France cyclists, Kenyan marathoners, they use that style of training. It's 80% very, very low aerobic training, and then 20% super short bursts of high-intensity training, and almost no in-between training, right? Almost no, I'm going to go out for a 1 hour lunchtime run that's at 70%, kind of hard, kind of not hard. There's none of that. It's either easy or super hard.
So how did the triathlon go? How was the
Okay,
Ironman?
anyways,
And were you nervous? Were you nervous going in because you probably never trained like this before?
Yeah, well, I'd use this type of training for recovery, right? Like a typical recovery day for me is heat, cold, yoga, foam roller, all these things that increase mitochondrial biogenesis and recovery and blood flow without actually beating up the body. And I think that more people should use those type of things for recovery. It's very, very good for athletes to get blood flowing in that way.
You see a lot of the UFC fighters doing the ice baths. You know, I know a few people are doing these cold gas chambers now in LA.
Cryotherapy.
Cryotherapy. Yeah. But, you know, I see it kind of few and far between. People don't talk about it too much.
Yeah, and the research on cold soaks, when you look at fighting inflammation, when you look at post-cold soak performance, like the next day's performance, soreness, it goes back and forth. There's no conclusive research that shows that when you jump into a cold bath after workout, it's going to help you bounce back faster or help your recovery the next day. Okay. But what they haven't looked at in these studies is mitochondria. And that actually takes a muscle biopsy. You go in and you get your muscle, it hurts. I've done it before.
They take a piece out of your muscle.
Yeah, I did a study at University of Connecticut last year where they had me follow a high-fat diet for 12 months. And then we did a muscle biopsy to see what happened to my muscle tissue, right? Like what the carbohydrate and fat composition of my muscle tissue was. Okay. And it hurts like a mother.
Where'd they take it from?
It was both thighs.
Really?
But it was 3 times, right? Okay. So, and one time was before a 3-hour treadmill run, and then right after the 3-hour treadmill run, and then you eat, and then after that to see what happens to the tissue. Wow. And then they also did fat biopsies off the butt cheek. Okay. I can tell you more about that study later if you want to hear, because we literally rewrote the textbooks as far as how much fat you can burn during exercise, because there was a very special diet they had me follow for that protocol.
Okay. Yeah, I want to hear about that later.
So anyways, I get into Ironman, and so I'm out there. It's surreal. Like I'm treading water. Like I have no clue what my body's capable of at this point. And so I'm out there treading water, and I didn't have a triathlon bike, right? So I shipped all the little parts that were in a box in my garage down to Hawaii to my team that was down there, Team Timex, and they have like a tent set up and like a bike shop and a bike mechanic. So they built me a bike and gave me a bike basically the day before the race.
Okay. And which isn't smart.
Yeah, and any cyclists who are listening are going to kind of know this, but Tour de France cyclists, if you watch them doing like their 40K time trial, right, like Lance Armstrong on the day where they're wearing the pointy helmet and the bodysuit, and it's one guy, right, like going as fast as they can for typically it's a 40K, and they're bent way over in this super aggressive position, and their heads like literally lower than their butt, and they're bent over the bike like this, just super aggressive position. Not designed to ride 112 miles in, definitely not designed as a position to be in for a guy who hasn't been riding his bicycle. Well, that's the position that I had on the bike. Okay. So I just basically rode as hard as I could on the bike. I'll tell you what happened in a second. But basically the swim felt great. Okay. I don't know if it was the weightlifting, if it was because I'd spent barely any time in the water, but I was 5 minutes slower than what I would typically swim 2.4 miles in. So usually I'd swim like around an hour or so. I was like an hour and 5 minutes. Okay. So it turns out that you can swim for long periods of time just by lifting weights and then using muscle memory of having swam before. That's interesting. So the swim wasn't that bad. The bike, like I said, I rode 12 miles as hard as I could, then everything locked up. Back locked, hip flexors locked, just the biomechanics were completely off. So I spent the rest of the ride just sitting up like a grandma with a pink basket on the front of my bike, literally just sitting up and riding. So my bike ride was almost an hour and a half slower than what it would normally take me to ride. And I was like stopping at aid stations and visiting with volunteers. And at one point I rode up to a volunteer aid station and was just basically chatting them up as I stretched my hip flexors so I could at least get back on my bike and pedal. And they invited me into their truck to smoke their bong, and they offered me like a little Ziploc bag full of weed before I rode off. And I'm like, they do blood testing at the finish line, and I can't do that, but it was funny to be in the world championship of our sport and get offered marijuana halfway through the bike ride.
That is funny.
And then the run wasn't that bad. I ran the marathon, but my legs were all kind of locked up from the bike ride. But ultimately, I finished it kind of in the middle of the field. With almost zero amount of time spent doing actual triathlon training. And the lesson that I learned from it is that the human body is capable of these big feats of endurance. without a lot of training. We are innate endurance animals, right? Like the fact that we're upright and we've got lots of surface area for cooling, the fact that we can sweat instead of pant, so we're able to cool ourselves so much more efficiently than a lot of other animals. The fact that we're intelligent enough to be able to carry fuel with us for long periods of time. The way that our butts are built, we actually get really, really good hip extension and push off the ground with each foot strike. What this comes down to is that, like, if you want to go out and run a marathon, or you want to go out and ride a bike 112 miles, you want to do anything that involves long periods of time moving, the human body is pretty good at that. What it tends to be weaker in is strength, power, injury prevention, flexibility, coordination. A lot of those things need to be trained. If you train those things, you can go out and you can do some pretty cool feats of endurance without the traditional, like an Ironman triathlete's going to, run 60 miles a week and ride their bike 200 miles a week and, swim, 4 or 5 days a week for 45 minutes to an hour. You don't have to do that stuff, right? If you just want to say, go out and do an Ironman, it turns out that if you're a relatively fit person, you can just go out and do one.
Okay, that's a good observation.
The body will keep going.
That's interesting. No, it's interesting how you say it. I guess it is true. The human body is kind of subject to some of those things you said, like injury and things like that. Can you tell me about the Spartan race? I actually did a Tough Mudder like about 4 months ago, and it was tougher than I thought. And it was, and I tell people it was actually 12 miles, and we were up and down these fucking hills in Britain, and we couldn't really dress for it because you can't, you can't wear like weatherproof stuff because you get soaked, and so
or get stuck in barbed wire,
and by the end. Like I couldn't even like hang on a ring. Like I was just falling into things, and it was like 4 hours, and I was like, and people were like, what was it like? I was like, it was tough, and I know the Spartan is very different. So what's a Spartan race like?
Well, I mean, the original Spartan race was the death race in Vermont on this guy's farm, like this 100-acre farm, Joe DeSena, who actually
he spoke at
Bulletproof. Well. It was kind of funny because he and I were scheduled to be on stage on the two different stages at two different times, and we actually went out and grabbed a taco beforehand and called an audible and walked onto the main stage both at the same time and gave our talks together.
Oh, wow.
And it was really interesting. Like he pulled the whole like Flintstones flipping tires, crawling under barbed wire thing, and then I took on the whole biohacking approach, and I was talking about infrared light therapy and cold thermogenesis and supplements and hypoxia, and we just combined it into one talk. And it actually turned out to be really interesting because by the end we were kind of tongue-in-cheek, like having people do burpees out in the audience. They run back to their cell phones to check their heart rates and see how many burpees that they'd done and download their Fitbit data. So it was kind of an interesting mashup of biohacking and then just like ancestral moving heavy stuff and flipping tires.
That's fantastic. Yeah, he was. I know someone who was at the conference. Actually, I just spent a week up in Scotland with a guy by the name of Dan Pena. You might have seen him. He's a 70-year-old guy. He wears 3-piece suits with ties, and he was out there. But he was really impressed with the Spartan guy and the whole piece.
So Joe's cool. And this was Joe's farm that the original death race was at. And honestly, I think that a big part of it was just him figuring out a way to get people to come to his farm and do chores. Because you'd like start off the race with like 5 hours of wood chopping. And I was actually at his farm last month speaking at an event that he had there. And like there's a whole mile like in the hills back behind his house. And it's literally like big, heavy stepping stones going up this entire hill for a full mile. And I'm thinking, how did all these stones? Well, that was part of the death race. Was people just had to carry these huge stones up the side of a mountain. So
I heard him talk about the problem. He just was like, dare the craziest thing, and then
you'd like dive down and get a cinder block from the bottom of a pond, and then memorize a Bible verse, and go to the top of a mountain holding an egg that you couldn't break, and you had to recite the Bible verse, and then come back down. And if you didn't do it, you had to go back down. And I'm actually I'm not signed up, but I am signing up for what's supposed to be the last death race, which is in June. So I'm going to do one of these races. But I've done the equivalent of the Navy SEAL Hell Week for civilians in Encinitas, California. That's like 7 days of sleep deprivation, and you're literally working out for 7 days. It's crazy.
How was it, and how much sleep dep, and what are they? Are you staying on the barracks, or like what do they do to you?
Yeah, I'll tell you about that.
Give me that. Let's talk Spartan, and we'll talk about that.
I'll tell you about the death race. That thing was called Kokoro. It was nuts. Absolutely nuts. It changed my life.
Good. I want to hear about
I
that.
felt like a god among men when I finished that thing. It was nuts.
So the Spartan race, for the current version though, for normal people,
well, people
is
wanted to do the
doable.
death race, and it was too dangerous, right?
Okay.
They had to like make it palatable for the general population, and probably from a business standpoint, they realized also that if you made it palatable for the general population, you'd get a lot of people signing up, and that has happened, right? It's like outgrown triathlon and marathoning by leaps and bounds.
It has,
it's a
right?
very fast-growing sport. It's a good business.
Right.
A couple of guys who run a different obstacle race, they run Shark Tank, and I think Mark Cuban gave them a loan on Shark Tank just because their business model was like no-brainer. I mean, the margins are huge. It's like old pieces of wood and barbed wire, and people are running around the forest, and you're charging them, $150
and Tough Mudder's doing very well as well. And they have a good vibe and a good community. I don't know what it's like with Spartan, but the Tough Mudder, they don't have times. Everyone finishes or no one finishes, and it's this whole vibe that they do really well.
Yeah, and the Spartan, it's an actual, it's a race,
Okay.
and it's a freaking blast. I mean, you're carrying cinder blocks with chains and crawling under barbed wire and leaping over 8-foot and 12-foot tall walls. And
it's a little dangerous, right?
They use nature to create the course.
Okay.
So whatever happens to be in nature in that particular, whether it's a desert with hills or whether it's a freaking I did one in a baseball stadium. It was AT&T Stadium in San Francisco where they're like tying your feet together with elastic bands and you're jumping up and down the stairs, and you'll carry 2 60-pound water jugs at a time up and down the stairs, rope climbs, cargo nets. Really, really fantastic test of human stamina, strength, skill, anticipation.
Okay. How long does it take?
And willingness to get dirty and cold, right? Like you get dirty and cold.
How long does it take?
It's just like triathlon, right? So you've got like sprints that take 30 to 50 minutes. You've got what are called supers that take anywhere from like an hour to 2 hours. You've got beasts. The first beast that I did took me 2 hours. The second one took me 4.5 hours, just because it was 2 different courses. So really depends. And then they've got the ultra beast, which is like a full marathon of obstacle racing. They're a blast though, and I live on 10 acres of wooded forest out in Washington State, and just to help me in my preparation, I've turned my entire acreage into one giant obstacle course. So I've got walls and ropes, and I've got like hay bales attached to the trees because the spear throw is part of the Spartan race. So basically you'll be running through the forest and you'll come up on a hay bale with a spear sticking out of it. You got to take the spear out and back off 25 feet and throw the spear, and then you'll run up, and I've got like upside down ropes that you climb attached from one tree to the next, where you're just climbing upside down like a monkey for 30 feet.
Sounds like no comparison to an Ironman. I mean, as far as the fun
totally,
and the creativity.
Totally different. And honestly, like I'm as fit as I've ever been in my whole life, like from bodybuilding, and I played collegiate tennis. I played whole set for the water polo team in college. I did sprint triathlon all the way up to Ironman triathlon, and now I'm in obstacle racing, and I'm in the best shape of my life. Just because it is, even when you look at like CrossFit, right? Like CrossFit has all those components: strength, speed, power, but they don't have the stamina and the endurance component. At least not much of it in traditional CrossFit. If you look at like CrossFit endurance, sure, they include that in something like that. But basic CrossFit, I mean, even that, I can go in and power lift with a CrossFitter, but then be able to ditch them in a 6-mile run just from the mud running training. So
did the CrossFit Games ever appeal to you, or any of those?
They appeal to me, but like I gotta choose my battles, and right now I'm digging the Spartan racing. And it's just like even when I was bodybuilding. So right now I weigh 185. When I was doing triathlon, I weighed about 175. When I was bodybuilding, I was at 210. And that was a hard weight for me to stay at, but that was the weight I needed to be at to move heavy things.
Yeah.
And I think getting up to that level again to do something like the CrossFit Games, it's just
you need to be big for the CrossFit Games. You got to eat a shit
ton of protein and crap through a straw. And
you need to be big for the deadlifts and things like that. But there's a lot of body weight stuff too, and pull-ups.
Yeah, there is. But I mean, if you look at guys like Rich Froning, they're big guys. I mean, they don't weigh a lot, but they're also pretty built. They've got a good amount of muscle. And when you get up to that amount of muscle, it does get hard to do something like a 6-mile run or an 8-mile run or a beast 13-miler. And I do like I've got one thing I have is like perseverance and endurance, right? Like I'm not.
Because you have to have that in the Ironman.
I'm very stubborn, right?
You have to be. You have to be a little insane to go that long, because that plays on your mind, right?
You can get genetically tested too. So I've done 23andMe genetic testing, and even though the FDA does not, at this point, allow 23andMe to publish things like your risk for type 2 diabetes or your prostate cancer risk, things like that. They used to be able to do that, and I got that data from them when I did the original testing. But now, when you log into 23andMe, you can't get that data. They're not allowed to give it to you, but you can export their data and then have another company import it. And I actually used a company from here in the UK called DNA Fit, and they imported my data. And one of the things that they gave me on my chart was what kind of a power/endurance animal I am, based off genetics, my gene markers for slow twitch and my gene markers for fast twitch. And it turns out I've got this really, really even blend. And I would say that like the ultimate CrossFitter, for example, would be skewed a little bit more towards the power side of that blend, right? Like a little bit more of the fast, like the type 2A and type 2B fast twitch muscle fibers. Whereas somebody who is just like a pure Ironman animal would probably be pretty good towards the endurance side and away from the power side.
Right.
But with a 50-50 mix of power and endurance, I think I've chosen the right sport to go after.
You know, before we get into this Hell Week that you did with the SEALs, do you ever think to yourself, like, what makes me want to do this stuff? Because you're 32 and you're like doing these obstacle courses. Before that, you were doing endurance stuff. Like, why are you driven to these things? Do you ever ask yourself that?
You know, part of it is that they're fun, that you feel alive. Like, I don't want to be that guy who is who's just like uber successful, who has a lot of nice suits, but who's just like, because I work with these guys who made it right when they were 30 and 40, and now they're like 45 years old and they're sick and their biomarkers are off and they've got hypogonadism. They aren't producing any testosterone. They've got 20 extra pounds of body fat to lose that frankly it's going to take years and years to get back off their body, because they spent time from 35 to 45 years old at steakhouses drinking wine and eating too much food and sitting in airplanes and it's
getting
like
bad habits too,
it's like I want to be successful, but I also don't want that life, right? I want to have a human body that is primed, that's optimized for performance and recovery and fat loss and digestion and sleep and brain and hormone optimization, right? Like, I want my body to perform at peak potential, and I want to be able to experience what that feels like. And for me, part of that is going out and testing the body, right? Like having some kind of a crucible that you put your body through each year that allows you to live, that allows you to test the limits of the human body. And the pressure of having that kind of keeps you dialed in with all these other things, like taking care of your brain, taking care of your blood sugar management, taking care of your body fat levels, staying strong, making that decision to not sit for 8 hours a day. It's like, it's a lot easier to stay motivated to do that stuff when it's not for health. And let's face it, even the goal of being around to see your grandkids hit a home run, like the whole anti-aging component, that can seem kind of far off. That can seem kind of woo. And it's hard to convince somebody to get a standing workstation instead of a sitting workstation, or to go sign up for, a 5K or something like that, and to tell them, well, this is because little Billy, your 10-year-old boy, is going to have kids someday, and you want to be able to see them, score a soccer
It's
goal.
not real enough.
Yeah, exactly. It's easier to say, because you want to kick ass in this Spartan that you're going to do and cross that finish line with a big smile on your face and just go out and get dirty and do something cool. Yeah. So for me, I know that's how I'm motivated.
No, it's interesting. I'm thinking about my Mutter experience, and like I knew it was coming up for 4 or 5 months. One of the guys I train with, I just signed both of us up, and he was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, well, "We're going now." And so, but leading up to it, I was like, I knew in the back of my mind that every training session I had to be thinking about it and thinking about what I was going to do, and I was anticipating it. It does push me, and
gets
then
you out of bed.
Yeah, and then when I got there, I felt awesome afterwards. I must say, it was like no feeling I ever felt. I've trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Brazil and trained Thai boxing, as I was telling you, in Thailand, and done all these other things. But there was something about that endurance piece, and it was in the elements, and I was freezing, and I was muddy, and there was like everything in my hair, and I was underwater. But this one girl jacked her ankle, and somebody I think broke their back, and the helicopter was coming in, and it's not like the safest thing.
It's like a fight.
Yeah, it is like a fight, and it's something a little bit like it's not a padded gym. You can mess yourself up out there, and so it was something cool about it.
I think that
Carnal.
some people don't like that. Yeah, carnal is a great word for it, but some people, and I think that I might fall into this category, they're just born a little bit competitive, a little bit just wanting to win, wanting to beat somebody else, almost like with this bloodthirst, but not in a violent way, like in a way that drives you to want to win. And I think some people take that and twist it into business success, and some people take that and twist it into personal success on another level. Like I think just based off of the cards I've been dealt in life, have twisted that towards exercise.
Right. Okay. And when you go in, do you try to win that race? Are you like, I'm going to win it? Are you scoping
That's
people
why
out?
that's why I'm afraid of what happens when I'm after 40, right? Because the only thing that gets me towing the line is not health and anti-aging. It's beating people, right? Like it's winning. Like that's what I want, is to win when I toe the starting line. So I'm probably gonna have to start golfing or something when I'm,
because you might stop winning.
Yeah, because once I know I can't win, or once I know the chance isn't out there for me to win or be one of the top guys, it's like I lose a lot of my motivation. So I'll probably have to figure that out at some point in the next 8 years.
And what's the peer group like? What is the guys that finish in the top 10 at these Spartan races? What are they like? Are they like you? Do they look like you? Are they your age?
They range. It's the wild west. This whole Spartan racing thing.
It's new, right?
It's new. Half the people don't know the rules. There's things like burpee penalties when you fail an obstacle, and everybody's got their own version of a burpee,
right. Okay.
And there's no standardization. And it's just like, it's the wild west. And the same thing with the racers. There's like my buddy Hunter, who I do a podcast with right now called the Obstacle Dominator, where we sit down every 2 weeks and just like give out obstacle racing tips. Okay. He's built thick, right? Like he's the kind of guy who, if he wanted to, could probably go and do really, really well in the CrossFit Games. He's just big. And then there's like Matt Novakovic. So Hunter's like 25. Matt Novakovic, he's like 39 or 40, and he's an ex-competitive cyclist who's like this little skinny toothpick guy who's put on some muscle and who's killing it at these things. And these guys are on two opposite ends of the spectrum. So some guys are built like fast, slightly small linebackers. Some guys are just thin and wispy, and they do good on like runners courses that don't require a lot of strength. And that's really interesting too, because you can go to battle on different courses, and you can almost predict how certain guys are going to do on certain courses based off of how much strength there is versus how much running versus how much, hills versus unbroken flat spaces. So it's kind of a total mashup of body types right now. So I think that there has yet to be discovered the ultimate body type for something like
for this. So that's exciting times. Yeah. It's kind of like the early days of UFC, where no one knew which martial art was going to win.
It's like that.
No one had ever trained for the UFC, so like no one had ever actually trained for an event like this. So
and for me, like I've had a lot of my success as a coach and doing a lot online as well in the triathlon market, right? Like that was kind of my niche market for a long time. And frankly, from a business standpoint, I'm looking at this as an opportunity also to help people, supply them with training plans and coaching, consulting, and all the things that, I did with triathlon. That's one thing I do like about my job is what I do is help people achieve their goals, right. But typically I like to be achieving those goals myself simultaneously.
Yeah, it helps when your trainer does that. Exactly. That we have like a 90% male audience. Obviously, like I said, we've had guys like Starrett and, fighters and Dolce and people like that. So they probably want to know, when it comes to the things you teach and your fitness, regimen and your ideas about nutrition. I mean, if you had to sum it up, in like kind of the 1 minute, what's different about the, Ben Greenfield approach, how do you describe it to people?
Well, it really is getting the ultimate marriage of health and performance, rather than the traditional approach of beating yourself up with an exercise session or taking a bunch of athletes and throwing them like a bunch of eggs against a wall and keeping the ones that don't crack.
Right. I think there's a quote from you. You said, rather than just work out like a madman and eat boring food. Like
right.
You try to show an alternative to that.
Right. And a big part of what I do is I find out how healthy you are. And for me, the reason that I did this was several years ago when I was in the throes of Ironman training, I started to test blood and biomarkers. And I saw high cortisol and low total testosterone, low free testosterone, high sex hormone binding globulin, dysregulated thyroid, high levels of inflammation and oxidized cholesterol particles, all these things that people who are fit on the outside and look really good in spandex or a Speedo or whatever on the outside,
they're dying on the inside, right? Okay. So that's a big part of what I do is I look not just at some of those nervous system components that we talked about to make sure that people's nervous system are primed, but I take advantage of a lot of the biohacks that help you get fitter, like we discussed, without actually going out and putting a lot of impact on the joints or doing a lot of hormone depleting activities. And then I'm a big fan of testing. We live in an era where testing is so... It's not inexpensive, but it's getting less expensive, right? The whole lab on a chip technology is not quite here yet,
right.
But a bit like the technology exists. In the US, it's the FDA that's keeping that technology from actually being applicable to the general population. Like I had on my podcast some folks from Talking 20 last year on my show, and they were literally doing 1 drop of blood. You send it in, they've got this mass spectrometer in their lab. They do a full range of tests on that 1 drop of blood and send you back all the results that you'd get from like an executive lab test. The FDA shut them down because they didn't want people sending their blood spots around the country, or I don't know what the exact reason was, but the technology is there to get this testing done very inexpensively. At this point, it is a little bit more spendy. You got to go to, like I work with a company called Wellness FX, for example, and you order your test on their website. They send you what's called a requisition form. You print that off. You do a little search for the lab that's nearest to your home. And so I've got a lab that's like a mile from my house. So I drive in, I hand them my form, they take my blood, they fill the tubes, I leave, and within about a week I get a PDF report of my results.
Okay.
And I can look at, and I have a lot of my athletes, and I encourage a lot of people who are listening in who want to strike that ideal balance between health and performance to do this same thing. You can look at what's going on with your body, what you're deficient in. And it's really cool from like a supplementation standpoint too. You know, I know because you're drinking Bulletproof coffee that you probably have looked into vitamins and supplements, and you know, I know Dave has things like you know the liposomal glutathione and you know, the smart drugs and stuff like that.
GABA,
and
he's got everything.
Yeah, and there's multivitamins, and there's fish oil, and there's vitamin D and vitamin K and antioxidants. You could take all this stuff, or you could go test and see what you're actually deficient in. I had a consult with an athlete literally from my hotel room yesterday. I was Skyping with a guy, and he had sent me all his bloods. And after looking through all his bloods, we determined about all he needed was a fish oil and a vitamin D. That was it. The guy's vitamins were good, his minerals was good, his antioxidant status was good, like almost everything was good. He needed a little bit better what's called omega-3, omega-6 fatty acid index, and his vitamin D was a little bit low.
Can you see that from one test, or do you need a comparison test?
You can see that from one test.
Okay. And can you read it? Can a normal person read it, or do you need help?
A normal person can. Well, I mean, like... Well, let me put it this way. If you're willing to do your research and you're pretty self-educated, you can use Dr. Google, and you can use like, there's a site like labtestonline.com or .org or something like that. Like you can dig through some of the data yourself if you are comfortable with that. I mean, in some cases that can be playing with fire if you know, whatever. You could like see that you're low in iron, for example, and take too much iron and get hemochromatosis and iron toxicity. And that's very easy to do things like that. So you need to be kind of careful. But at the same time, this type of testing is something that is available to people that aren't just like, you know, jet-setting executives who originally, you know, 10 years ago, you paid $10,000 at Princeton Longevity Institute to get blood testing like this, and now you can do it online for.
So there's no excuse. Anyone listening to us right now, including me, we should go get our blood tested, right?
You should get your blood tested, and there are a lot of you know, there's like nutritionists and physicians that partner with these companies who go through your labs for you. So same thing with the gut. And this is an uncomfortable topic for a lot of people, but you have to figure out what's going on in your colon, in your small intestine, in your stomach, what your pancreatic enzyme production looks like to find out if, like athletes, for example, almost every athlete, they wind up having enzyme deficiencies just because they're burning through so many calories and they're asking their digestive system to pump out so many enzymes. So they're supposed to be in a digestive enzyme complex, but that's something you can test. You can test pancreatic enzyme production. You can test bacteria, yeast, fungus, parasites.
How do you test that?
That's not a blood test. That's a poop test.
Poop test.
So you typically would order something like this to your home.
Right.
The best ones, it's 3 days. Right. So you poo in this little pan one day. You scoop it into a tube. You put that in the fridge. Usually your partner loves this because he poops in the fridge, a little FedEx bag or whatever. And then you do it the next day, and then you do it the next day, and on that final day, you send it off to the lab.
So they want a mix, a mean.
Right, because your microbiome fluctuates all the time. I mean, that's the whole deal with like these whole, like, you've probably heard of fecal transplants or like this whole new trend about poop pills.
No, I haven't.
And
Where have I
this
been?
is now, where have you been with the poop pills?
In London.
So what they're doing now is they're doing fecal transplants in people whose microbiomes are completely messed up from heavy antibiotic use or some kind of a bacterial infection that wiped out the good bacteria in their gut.
Okay.
People who have like inflammation of the colon, like colitis, a lot of things that reflect completely damaged bacterial balance in the gut. They're now giving them fecal transplants to repopulate their gut with good bacteria.
Okay.
These are literally,
you take those orally?
You could Google them. They're called poop pills. Yeah,
Poop
you
pills.
take them. You can take them orally or rectally, and they literally repopulate your gut. I was actually in Vermont.
Have you done this?
No, I haven't done it because I don't think I need to. I think so. It's kind of gross to think about, but when you first pass through mom's birth canal, right, you are, as a baby, picking up tiny little pieces of her poop and swallowing them, like as you go through her canal. Completely clean birth via C-section in a hospital, you're not getting any of that. So you're not getting pre-populated with a lot of this good bacteria. Now, fortunately, mom's breast milk also has that. So even if a kid is born via C-section, if they're breastfed, they're still getting exposed to a lot of that bacteria early on in life.
Okay.
But in an era of antibiotics and hand washing and bottle boiling and soy formula instead of breast milk and antibacterial hand soap, like, we're almost too clean. And that's affected a lot of people's guts, and some people to the point where they actually benefit from eating poop, like doing a fecal transplant.
Wow, the human race is coming to a new level. If the aliens can see us now.
It's crazy.
So how often would you say having a blood test and having a fecal test? All right.
So what I do is a blood test every quarter. Right.
Okay.
So every 3 months I go in and I do one of the Wellness FX panels, just their full, like, get the hormones, the lipid panel, the thyroid, like the full meal deal.
Okay.
Once a year, and I've done this more often than once a year, if I come down with something, like I competed in Thailand a couple of years ago in a triathlon, and I came back with just like gut distress and something wasn't right. And like every 2 weeks I was waking up like clockwork. It was really weird. Like on the weekends, I would just wake up and I'd be wide awake from like midnight to 4 a.m. And I could just tell something wasn't right. And I went in and got a gut test, and I had a parasite, like the type of parasite that you get from stagnant water
Thailand.
in Asia.
Right, okay.
And these things hatch every couple of weeks. It's really nasty to think about. And so that's why I wasn't sleeping every couple of weeks, because these things would hatch, and it's nasty. But you don't know a lot of times if you have something like that going on in your body unless you test. So I'm a fan of a gut test once a year to just see if you need to hit the reboot button on your gut. I'm a fan of a blood test every quarter. And then there's another test if you've got a little bit more money to spend, if you want even a deeper dive into full vitamin status, mineral status, heavy metals, like all the smaller things, and that's called an ion panel. It's also known as a SpectraCell analysis, and this is one where you can find out. Usually it's like a $1,000 to $1,500 panel, but you can find out every little thing.
Is that blood as well? Or?
That's a blood.
Okay.
Yep.
And is there hair analysis? Is that relevant?
The hair analysis you can do. It's funny you should ask, because I haven't done that, but I have shipped off my hair. I actually got a haircut before I started on my last bout of travel, and I took some of the hair and sent it off to a lab just because I was curious. But that hair test is somewhat similar to the SpectraCell. You get minerals, you get metals. It's just basically a look at what's happening, but they're looking at the root of your hair over the last few months of growth.
Okay. So basic takeaways from this: people should be really checking out their heart variability in the morning, and at least if you've never had your blood test,
get your blood tested.
Just get it done, right?
Get a poop test. Right. Do the heart rate variability testing. Opt for a SpectraCell if you wanted to do the full meal deal. Those are most of the biggies from an analysis standpoint. But returning full circle to how we got on this topic in the first place, like that's what I focus on. That's different, right? Like, you don't just exercise. Like the name of my book right now that you talked about earlier, it's Beyond Training. And the reason that I titled it Beyond Training is because it goes into all the stuff that athletes forget to do, or that the general exercise enthusiast forgets to do, that goes way above and beyond the workout. The recovery parameters, optimizing your brain and your nervous system, the supplement component, the testing component, basically taking care of your body and getting it to be an optimized human machine, rather than just throwing workouts at it and keeping your fingers crossed that it bounces back.
Right. Now, the UFC is like littered with examples of that. Only recently, in the last year or two, some of the champions have actually shipped in nutritionists, and you hear their diets beforehand, and it was basically hard sparring sessions and pizza. And you're like, how did you ever get to the elite? But now the elite are competing with the elite, and you can't do that anymore.
You can be fast, and you can be good on pizza. Right. But part of this comes down to the health portion too. Like when you look at like the study that they did did, I think this one was on marathoners. It may have been runners in general, but they found that they had increased risk of heart issues. But if you go and you look at the diet of a marathoner, they're eating a high amount of carbohydrate that has potential to create oxidation of cholesterol. What happens is when you have a combination of high cholesterol, this is why you shouldn't have like a scone with a bulletproof coffee.
Okay.
When you combine cholesterol with chronically elevated blood sugar levels, the sugar does what's called glycation. It glycates the cholesterol particle, or it glycates protein, and it can oxidize the cholesterol, which makes the cholesterol very likely to dig into an endothelial cell wall and cause something like atherosclerotic or plaque buildup. When it combines with proteins, it can cause like neurofibrillary tangles on the brain level. It can cause damage to connective tissue. This is called advanced glycation end products, where you get joint pain and your skin starts to wrinkle a little bit faster than usual and your muscles don't recover. That's just glycation. It's just attached. Same thing that happens when you bake sugar with protein.
How did you learn all this stuff?
Like a honey baked ham is like the worst thing that you could eat.
But it tastes good to humans. How did you learn all this stuff? I mean, you don't have a degree in this.
I have a master's degree in nutrition and physiology.
Okay, all
right.
Did you learn all this then or not, or did it just tee you up for?
Honestly, like on the university level, the biomechanics and the physiology component is pretty sound. I mean,
it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The nutrition is crap though.
Right.
I mean, it's just dyed in the wool.
20 years ago, thinking nothing.
Exactly.
Okay.
But I did take a lot of higher level biochemistry. I did 400, 500 level biochemistry and organic chemistry courses. I did a lot of human pharmaceuticals courses. So I studied this stuff and had a general knowledge of the chemistry back in college.
Do you like the term biohacking, or do you think it's overused too much these days? And I might have hit a nerve here. Or do you think that some people use it in the wrong way?
I think it's a cool phrase, honestly. Like it sounds cool.
It does.
I mean, you're hacking your biology, right? You're taking the I was big into World of Warcraft, and I bought the computer program when I was a kid, where it was similar to Doom, where you could make your own first-person player game, but you were just programming Doom and in a way hacking computer games and figuring out how to make them more efficient, or how to figure out how to make them do something they wouldn't normally do, or do something they would normally do faster or more efficiently.
Okay.
And I mean, really, that's all you're doing.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, biohacking, drinking a glass of wine is biohacking in a way, and drinking caffeine is biohacking. So we've been doing it for a long time.
I think that probably the super serious biohackers on like longacity.com is a really popular forum for biohackers. And, there are some more serious people like associated with like the bulletproof biohacking that are doing like the transcranial direct stimulation, or the TDCS, and like the light sound simulation, and the what's the one called upgraded focus, where you're literally wearing electrodes and staring at a computer as it's causing static within your brain when you lose focus. Like, I think some people do consider that to be true biohacking, whereas sitting in a cold pool is just sitting in a cold pool.
Okay.
But I consider anything that hacks you into a more efficient exercise environment to be really whatever you want to call it, a biohack, a trick,
Can you take
strategy, a technique.
Can you take it too far? Is like when you're walking around with electrodes on your head all the time, is that too far, or is there any too far in your opinion when it comes to biohacking? Can you overanalyze?
So I wrote an article about this a while back, like how I got to a point in my exercise career where I was like, screw the heart rate monitors, screw the power meters, screw the GPS. I just want to go out and run in the forest. Right? I just want to go out and get in touch with nature. And this was I wrote this at the point where I had become a blogger and a podcaster and a freelancer and was spending time in front of the computer. And when I got outside, I just wanted to be outside and just play.
Right, and not in a laboratory, which you are sometimes. I
didn't want to have stuff attached to me.
Right, because you're running experiments on your body
So
always.
I think you get to a certain point where you can start to suck the enjoyment out of life when you're attached to something too long. Like the heart rate variability that I talked about, they do have something called a health patch that you can wear 24/7 that monitors you via Bluetooth, perspiration, skin temp, heart rate variability, movement, steps, everything, feeds that into your phone. But you're carrying your phone around all day, and you've got a Bluetooth signal coming out of your chest all day. And I have yet to be convinced that there's not some kind of a biological cost to that. Like, I just, I hardwire into my Wi-Fi router when I'm working on my computer. My whole house is like metal shielded wiring. everything's designed with low volatile organic compounds. It's just like, I try and be as healthy as possible. And I think that some of this stuff, the health benefits have yet to be proven.
Okay.
So
no, I think that's smart. I mean, it could be like smoking in the 60s.
I think you have to have like a mashup of ancestral living, right? Where you're eating organically and like delving into the food that your grandparents would have recognized, versus eating, Soylent or whatever these bottled compounds, or what Michael Pollan calls edible like food stuff, right? Where it's like, these packaged foods that technically supply you with all your multivitamin mineral needs, but it's not like sitting down to a nice omelet with some pastured bacon and, maybe a kale smoothie or something like that.
Right.
You have to kind of find that ultimate marriage between ancestral living and biohacking. And I think that you do have to be careful.
Let's talk about
ultimately, though, from an ethical standpoint. I mean, really, it's not hurting anybody for you to have direct cranial stimulation on your head. So it's kind of like, if that makes you happy and more efficient,
then
go for it. Yeah.
You told me about your home in Washington and how it's just completely like when you're out traveling, you're speaking, you're in London, you're active, but when you go home, you're really isolated. You're at home with
total introvert
with your family. Yeah. You're introverted. Are you unplugged from the web as well? And like, how much of that getting back to basics, getting back to ancestral living is important to you? Just as an aside, I spent the last week up in Scotland, at a seminar, and we didn't have Wi-Fi access, and so when I was in my room at night, I couldn't do what I might do, which is check the MMA website, and I was like, I noticed that Jesus Christ, what I've been using the web for is a distraction from my own life to a certain extent, and I plug in so I don't have to deal with myself. It's almost like an addiction.
That's why up until the advent of Wi-Fi, people were super duper efficient on airplanes, right? Because that's when you're disconnected, and that's when you do your best writing and everything.
Right.
When I travel, I travel a lot. I'm traveling about 2 weeks out of every month right now during the year. So when I'm gone, I'm just like gone.
And that's business for you, or
it's
prep
business.
for races?
It's speaking. It's racing.
Okay. That's a lot.
I speak at some private events, some conferences. When I travel, usually I'm throwing down some races. So it's a mashup of things that I'm traveling for. But when I'm home, I'm home. Like, I don't go into town. I don't go to restaurants. I don't get out. Like, I literally just like sit at home. I've got this big kitchen table carved out of an old oak tree. I'm either there or downstairs in my office. And I have that home, just to use the phrase again, biohacked to create the ultimate kind of ancestral living environment. So there are no Wi-Fi signals. Every room has special light bulbs in it that are either blue light bulbs or red light bulbs designed to simulate either night or day. So like all the bedrooms have no bulbs with actual blue light in them. It's a HEPA and a UV air filter to filter out any mold or mycotoxins or fungus or things like that might get into the house.
Nice.
There's the entire thing is metal shielded wiring. There's kill switches in every bedroom, so when you go to bed, boom, electricity completely off in the room. Blackout curtains. So it's pretty. And we're adding goats and chickens right now. We have a huge vegetable garden. We're building up a farm. Buried propane tank. We're adding solar panels to the roof so that we can be completely off the grid. Nice. Right now we do have like a power in from the local power facility.
Okay.
But yeah, like it is a really, really ancestral place to be. And I've got what's called a LAPCA device. It's this little device that measures electromagnetic fields that you can attach to an iPhone, and you can walk around your house. Usually you'd have to buy a super expensive meter off the internet to do this, but this one's cool. Like it's got a little plug in it. You can plug it into vegetables to find out how many nitrates are in the vegetables to figure out if they're really organic or not. Like if that organic carrot that you bought actually was sprayed with pesticides or herbicides. It measures radiation, it measures like humidity and temperature, and it measures EMF. So I walk around my house and there's like nothing. Like there are no signals in my house. There's a tiny signal when you get down to the office near the Ethernet switch. And it's just very, very slight. So when I'm at home, like I'm shielded from all this stuff, and it's really cool. It's like every time I return home, it's like detoxing and cleansing because you're just I'm just out in the forest.
Yeah.
So,
no, that's really nice. Yeah. How's business? What's it like to be kind of out there and talking about fitness? I know you were at the masterminds, this year and the year before, and I know a bunch of people that were there as well, Alex and Sully. And what's it like turning what you love into a business? And also, you're in a really crowded field where everyone has their angle on fitness.
The six-pack abs field.
Yeah, well, there's that. There's so many different things.
Yeah.
There's the CrossFit people. There's the six-pack abs. There's the look. There. How do you find it?
I've never had a problem from a business standpoint. When I was 15 years old, I started my own private tennis coaching business and used that as a way to save up money for college. When I got to college, I had 4 jobs. I was working at a coffee shop, I was working at a bakery, I was a personal trainer, and then I was TAing at the school and taking massive loads of credits at the same time. Like I've always been driven. And I've always been willing to get up and work hard. And I spent a long time just hustling in the fitness environment, starting personal training studios and gyms in both Washington State and Idaho. I partnered with a lot of physicians. That was kind of like my thing, was the whole exercise is medicine approach. So they'd send me their patients to work with, and that was just an approach that worked really well for me. Like that was my niche, was I'd reach out to physicians in the community, they'd hook me up with their patients, and I'd coach them for weight loss and things like that. And then simultaneously I was doing triathlons. So that was my other niche, was endurance sports. I spent a good deal of time doing that and getting good at it. And that's when I was nominated as the top personal trainer of the year, and things kind of started to blow up after that, right? Just because it was kind of a lucky break for me, and also kind of a consequence of me spending 6 years, with my nose to the grindstone. And I'd stay up till 2 to 3 a.m. in my apartment at night trying to build myself a website, right? Like trying to figure out how to do HTML and how to take client forms and how to send workouts back and forth. 7 years ago, figuring out how to podcast and how to record audios and videos and put them out on the internet. And I've been doing that literally every week since, like without stopping, for the past 6 years.
Yeah, that's hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like consistency, doing a little bit of work. I wake up every day. I do the hard thing first, which for me is either writing or creating part of a program that I'm creating, or doing something that produces content, right? Like article, audio, or video content.
Right, which is crucial.
Single freaking day.
Every day. You're working on an audio, video, or an article.
I don't buy ads. I don't do PPC. I don't do any of that. Like I just write content and put it out there and try and help people with the content that I create.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of like the Kevin Kelly's 1,000 true fan approach, right? Where you help people, you're nice to them, you provide them with direction, you help them to cross the finish line with a smile on their face, you put out content that actually allows them to do that. You get up and you work and you do the hard thing, and you be willing to be uncomfortable, to do, the work equivalent of taking a cold shower instead of taking a hot shower, right? Like you do the stuff that maybe you don't really feel like doing. And that's pretty much the way that I've lived my life for the past more than a decade. And business is going well. Like I don't have to worry about money, but I really haven't had to worry about money that much since college, since I was working 4 jobs. The only difference now is I'm really kind of sort of working one. But yeah, I mean, there's no replacement for hard work. There really isn't. No, and that's like the one thing I tell people when they come to me and they're like fresh out of college or haven't even started college, and they're like, I want to do really well, in the online fitness business. And I'm like, go out there and get your hands dirty for 5 to 10 years training people, seeing every single type of body type there is, getting sweaty, getting dirty, putting people through workouts, seeing their face, checking their heart rate. Like, you got to put your time in the trenches. I think that's really important.
Good advice. And if you go to your website, you can see all the content. I mean, the videos on YouTube, and I mean, podcasting, it's no walk in the park making one of those every week, by any means. So just making that happen is, it's all
fun,
very
though.
obvious.
It's fun. And I mean, like once you systematize hard work, like a lot of it's fun. Like, you've got all these video cameras in your studio and a fancy mic setup. And like, even for me as like a podcaster and a video producer, when I walk into a situation like this, I'm like, wow, he's managing all this all at once somehow and still podcasting. But for you, it's just like a system, right? Yeah. Like you've got it figured out. So for what seems like really, really hard work to a lot of people, because you've systematized it makes it a little bit easier. And that, I use Evernote. I've got an Evernote doc set up for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I have a specific task list associated with each of those days. Tuesdays are my video day. If somebody asks me for a video on Friday or somebody talks to me about a video on Thursday, that's completely off my brain and out of my head and onto the Tuesday Evernote doc. And that's where it ends up. And so I don't have this long running checklist. You know, Wednesdays are podcasting days. Fridays and Saturdays are the days that I review nutrition logs from clients. Like, you know, you kind of partition stuff up, you create a system that works for you. You can get a lot done.
That's a great takeaway from this. Besides all of the other knowledge and biohacking stuff, just the way you manage that work and get it done. And if people go to your website, they'll be able to see. I mean, there's deep content there. You put a lot of time into those videos and thoughts. So two questions for you. If I bring you that 48-year-old guy who's made his millions and spent 10 years in the steakhouses and drinking the wine and probably has some gout and is probably not 20, but probably 40 pounds overweight and, you know, hasn't done anything.
Right. The big red inflamed face and the glasses.
Yeah. And maybe he's in his late 40s and I bring him to you on his doorstep. I mean, you know, what do you do sometimes when you're like, I don't know how to get him to motivate about himself. I don't know how to get him to care about himself. I mean, is there things you've learned over the years where you know how to kind of get results out of people that might be result oriented in a different arena, but when it comes to their body, I see it all the time. A lot of people just say, oh, I don't know how to do that.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. You can't start with the CrossFit workout and the huge dietary changes, right? It's got to be little things. Like 2 things that I do right away is I get them moving, right? Like every morning we're just going to do a light, easy walk. And that you don't have to explain this to people because they just automatically do it, but that engages you with morning sunlight, which jumpstarts your circadian rhythm, which helps you to get to sleep later on at night, and it jumpstarts fat oxidation when you're doing it prior to breakfast. You don't have to tell them all that. You can just say, okay, we're going to start with a nice 20-minute morning walk. But there are so many other biological implications that happen from that's an enormously helpful place to start. Gluten-free is another big one.
Nice.
Just because, I mean, it's easy enough to do. Yeah, a lot of the gluten-free frankenfoods that you see in the grocery store now are still pretty good at spiking your blood sugar, and they're not that happy for you metabolically. But the cool thing is that when you eliminate gluten, you're getting rid of a lot of the wheat germ agglutinins that can cause things like brain fog, that can cause inflammation. I mean, just because wheat that's been bred for high yield crop has such concentrated levels of gluten in it that's very, very tough for the body to handle from an immune system standpoint, both for nervous system tissue and gut tissue. And it's kind of an easy concept. So rather than saying go dairy-free, soy-free, follow a paleo autoimmune diet, yada, 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 for 4 weeks or 8 weeks, you just say, okay, we're just going to go gluten-free. We're going to try gluten-free for a little while. So go gluten-free. I like that heart rate variability testing. I found most people to be really open to that. And again,
non-invasive, simple.
Just like that morning walk, all of a sudden, rather than getting up, jumping out of bed, and going and running away from the lion that's jumping out from the email inbox in your computer, for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, you're lying in bed and you're breathing. Right. And you're getting in touch with your body. And just that slight change can change somebody's stress levels the entire day, or like their frame set, getting out of bed in the morning. It's the little things like that you have people start with versus a full-on structured routine, gluten-free, soy-free, dairy-free, everything free, eat cardboard, and work out every day hard.
Yeah.
Instead you move, you measure your nervous system for a few minutes each morning, and you get rid of that one dietary trigger that I would say is one of the biggest culprits when it comes to brain and body.
Gluten over sugar or gluten over glucose.
Yeah, exactly.
Fructose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because anything that has gluten in it is generally going to be something that's higher glycemic index or that has a big enough glycemic index to spike your blood sugar, but you're getting the double whammy, right, of the inflammation from the glucose and the chronic high blood sugar. At least with something like white rice or a corn tortilla instead of a flour tortilla, et cetera, you're just getting the blood sugar spike and not some of those other deleterious side effects.
Okay, good tip. Let's talk about mentors. We were talking about Ty Lopez earlier. He was here a few months ago. I'm a big fan of Ty.
Yeah,
Ty,
cool.
He feels like a man that's wise beyond his years. He feels like he could be a 65-year-old guy telling you what he knows at kind of mid-40s. He's digested all that information in the books.
He did live with the Amish. I think
he's got crazy stories. He says those are the best times of his life. Even though he loves his house in the Hollywood Hills and stuff. And I know he had some backlash from our fans via his ayahuasca opinions, and I disagreed with him, but I really liked him being here. How important is it for you to have mentors? Have you identified them over the years, or have there been kind of virtual guys that you were watching when you were in your 20s and you were like, I like his work ethic? Just like some guys will listen to you talk about creating content every day, and they'll be like, I want to do that. What's it been like finding yours?
First of all, I'm really shitty at mentors. I don't do mentors very well.
As in mentoring people or getting mentors?
Getting mentors.
Okay, all right.
I was homeschooled kindergarten through 12th grade. Starting in 8th grade, my parents would buy a bunch of books, stack them in the front of my room. I'd open my bedroom door, grab the books, and figure out how to get through them. And that, like, no teacher, just a book.
Wow.
Like, that was the way that I learned. For me, that worked. I don't think that that's a very good approach to schooling, by the way.
Your sons aren't.
My
doing
sons
that?
are not on the pile books in front of the bedroom door approach. But for some reason, because I was hardwired as an independent learner, complete nerd growing up, I would be happy, kind of like I am now, to sit at home in my underwear at the kitchen table. I would just lay in my room for hours reading books. We'd have company. My parents got to the point where they had to force me out of my room to go out, look them in the eye, shake their hands, and then I'd be back in my room, like reading my fantasy novel about knights and princesses.
I'm surprised you can hold a conversation.
Eventually playing World of Warcraft, and like that was me, right?
Did you have to push yourself to be extroverted at some point?
I don't think that I am I think I still am introverted.
Okay.
I think that I learned conversation in some sense through teaching. Once I started teaching tennis, for example, I had to express ideas to people. I was really into writing and still am.
Which helps your speaking tremendously.
I ended up teaching writing classes, and that helped me get in front of people. I started taking speech and debate, and I joined the speech and debate team in college and was on the team for 2 years, and I was the impromptu speaker. So this was where they'd give you a few minutes and you'd prep, and then you'd go on stage and speak. And like all of these things have helped me, but I'm still introverted. Like still when I get on stage to speak, and even when you and I are sitting here, like doing a podcast, whenever I'm in public, there's still that sense that I have to consciously be Ben Greenfield the athlete, or Ben Greenfield the biohacker, or whatever. Ben Greenfield, the teacher, the podcast, whatever you want to call me, and I have to consciously act that role out. Otherwise, I would be happy to just like sit here and have a cup of water and listen to you talk for a while.
Right. Okay.
And when you read a book like The Power of Introverts, for example, that whole concept of being a chameleon, or having that approach of acting when you're speaking rather than just like being yourself, you have to project that personality. And I've always been very good at acting. I did a lot of like stage theater and the impromptu speaking and stuff like that in college. That's okay, right? Like if you're introverted, that's how you do things. Like when you get on stage, you're acting, and when you're speaking, you're acting. Even when you're conversing, you're doing a little bit of like chameleon and what's it called when you're simulating someone else's body position, that type of thing.
Mirroring.
Mirroring. Yeah. Like all of these things are really, really important for introverts to learn. And I've had to kind of pick a lot of those things up over the years. But ultimately, to get back to your question about mentorship, I grew up not knowing how to have a mentor, not knowing how to listen to a teacher, not wanting a teacher, not wanting a boss, not wanting someone to tell me what to do. And so even still, right, like literally like 2 decades later, I'm still at the point where listening to people and having a mentor is very difficult for me. Now, I have had a few people who either have writings that I read religiously. Like there are certain blogs that I follow, and I kind of learn from those people through osmosis. There are some people that I'll talk to on the phone, and I'm getting better at this. For example, you talked about Tai Lopez. Tai Lopez has actually been mentoring me for a few months.
Cool.
He and I talk on the phone. He gives me advice. He's a guy that, for some reason, I'm able to take his advice and I'm able to listen to him. But for the most part, I'm a really bad guy to ask about mentorship because I don't do well with mentors.
Well, you're doing it now. So.
I haven't really had many mentors, and like working with Ty has been one of my first experiences doing something like that. But
but like books are my mentors, right? Like the internet is my mentor, which sounds really dumb, but it's worked for me. So
no, I understand. It's interesting because Ryan Holiday was here. I know you know Ryan, and he was Robert Greene's mentor, right? But he even said he never had a formal relationship. Like, are you my mentor? Yes, you are now my mentee. It's more like, look, he helped him out with this, and every now and then he'd glean a piece of knowledge. But a lot of mentorships aren't formal relationships.
Yeah,
they're just people.
Even like
Spartan
racing, for example, right? Like building my obstacles in my backyard, or even showing up for my first race and knowing what was going to be there. Like for me, I went to the YouTube channel and I sat there for like 2 hours, like looking at every obstacle that there was and watching the YouTubes of how to do them. And like, I'm fine learning that way. And a lot of people I know, they would be like, well, call up the top athlete on the phone and get with him on the phone and learn from him that way. And that's just, I don't know. That's not the way my brain works. I just, I read the book or I watch the video and I go do it, and I'm just not into mentorship that much.
Fair enough. That's good. That's a good, unique answer. Yeah. Let me break down the Navy SEAL training, really quick.
Dude,
it was a week. I'm from Del Mar.
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
Oh, really? I'm in a similar area. What were the details of it? Did you stay on site?
So this is put on by Commander Mark Devine, and he runs U.S. CrossFit in Encinitas, California, and he does this thing called the SEAL Fit Academy, which is about 5 to 7 hours a day of training, and what are called they're called the SEAL Fit WODs. So they're like the CrossFit WODs, but they're like the CrossFit WODs times 10. I mean, these WODs take you like 3 hours to do, and that's just like part of your day. And a lot of times it's a 2-a-day of those WODs.
If you're not a CrossFitter, WOD stands for workout of the day, and they post them all the time, and you usually post your time to do it. But the normal ones are 30 minutes or 20 minutes or 40 minutes, right?
Yeah, for these you start off with mobility. And like the first day we showed up for mobility, it took us 2 hours. We were literally doing like every form of push-ups and jumping jacks and sit-ups and lateral movements, and like it got into sandbags and Turkish get-ups with a kettlebell, and we finally got done and everybody's sweating and we're like ready for breakfast, and then Commander Devine's like, okay, now we're gonna do the WOD. And it's just like, it's a crazy amount of volume, but these guys are SEALs, right? They're used to just like suffering for days and days on end, carrying 100-pound packs around with weapons and having their lives on the line while they're doing it. So
he's going light on you guys. There's no SEAls with you.
Well, we don't have like they put us through because SEAls actually go to this camp. It's called Kokoro.
Okay.
They go to it to either get ready for BUD/S training or to touch up on their skills afterwards. And so this is about everything that they experience without weapons and without boats. Like they take away the things that could kill you.
Right. Okay.
Just because of the liability risk. But they beat you up mentally. They fly in like SEALs, and they actually, if you look at the photos from the event, a lot of the guys have their faces blurred out because they're still out in Afghanistan killing people, and so they can't show them on the photos. But they're there, like driving you on 26-mile night hikes, and they do like surf swim torture where you're lying in the ocean for 5 hours from like 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. and the waves are just battering you, and it's super duper cold in San Diego once you're in the water for that long. So you're shivering, you're hypothermic, you stand up every hour, and they have you put your hands above your head. And if you can't put your hands above your head, that means you're so hypothermic that you can't move anymore. So then you got to go do burpees or push-ups or sprints to get your body warm enough so that you can go back in the water and get your face blasted with sand again and lay in the surf and the dark and the seaweed, and you're all like, everybody's there linking arms and trying not to let each other float away. And then, for example, we did a 26-mile night hike. We did that. We got back to the facility, and this was just one day. We got back to the facility. We had to do what's called MRF, which is a CrossFit workout. That's a mile run, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats. So it was MRF with a weighted pack. And then it was really, we finished that. I think this was a day before it ended. And they took us out. One of the commanders, Coach Cummings, he's like, congratulations, you guys. We're taking you to a pancake breakfast. And so we were all looking at each other, and this is after eating MREs for like the past 2 days,
which
just
don't
like
taste
nasty,
good.
Like tomato soup that's supposed to last 10 years, and just so many preservatives and just nasty stuff that gums you up. So pancake breakfast sounds pretty good. So they march us at like a half mile down the alley to this tiny little diner that they'd reserved a bunch of tables in, and it's Coach Cummings. There were like 6 other of the SEAL Fit guys there, like the commanders and the instructors, and they say, okay, what you're going to do is go in there, you're going to eat everything on your plate. You guys have 1 hour, then you're going to march back out here. I want you to stay silent, eat your food, and come back out. And so they bring us these huge buttermilk pancakes, like the really, really dense ones that are like bubblegum to chew. I mean, like these things are just super duper dense, and syrup and coffee and peanut butter and eggs and bacon and hash browns and ketchup on these huge plates, right? Like these huge dinner plates. And we eat our breakfast, and there's a few guys, and there's a couple of girls there. There's like a firefighter and a strength coach. So a couple of females, mostly dudes. A few of the guys are turning a little bit pale. You can see that they're pretty full, a little bit of a food coma, a little bit of food sickness. And then they bring out another plate. Same thing. Boom, got to eat it all. So they stuffed us and stuffed us, and we were literally sick. Like guys were getting blue, guys were like starting to vomit there in the restaurant. Like it was really, really bad. So we came out, and like people are already throwing up. Like as soon as they stumble out of the restaurant, they're like throwing up pancakes in the back alley. And they take us off running down the alley, and we spent the next 2.5 hours working out on a hill in the sun in Encinitas. Uphill burpees, backwards bear crawls, partner carries, hill sprints, like everything. And this just went on for days and days and days.
And you knew this was going to happen going in? You knew it was going to be 7 days of this?
You go in. Well, the first,
it's the
last like 60 hours that are really, really hard.
Okay.
The first few days you do get to sleep. Like you get to some points where they like rip you out of bed and throw you in the ocean. And so you kind of get to the point where you're sleeping, but you're afraid to actually fall asleep because you know somebody could be storming into your room and pushing you out onto the grinder and spraying cold water in your face and telling you suck and you need to go home. And blindfolding you and having you balance on a log and do overhead press, just like every single way they can beat you up mentally and physically. And you get to a certain point where, and this was like on a Sunday afternoon after the week, where their Commander Mark Devine, he's the guy who runs it, he just comes out, and I did the 34th one, like the 34th time that they've run this, and he comes out and he's just like, Kokoro 34 secured. And this is at a point where we were all standing out in the grinder with 400-pound logs hoisted over our head, about to carry them down to the ocean, where we were told we were going to be doing sit-ups with the logs out in the ocean. And he just comes out and he's like, boom, done. Congratulations.
Right. So
no medal, no trophy. We got a T-shirt.
Okay. So they're messing with you constantly mentally. You don't know when it's going to stop.
But I mean,
did anybody ring the bell or leave or?
2 people. We only lost 2 people.
Okay. Out of what?
Really
20?
good. We had 19.
Okay.
So we dropped down 7. So it was really not bad.
That's good.
So we did well, but I left there, and I told you earlier, like I literally felt like a god among men. Like flying home on the airplane and in the airport with all the people walking through in their jeans and plaid shirts and their suits, and I've just got like my knees are all bloody, and I've got my pain is the feeling of weakness leaving the body T-shirt on, and I'm just covered in just like I'm still dirty. I've still got sand coming out my ears, and you're walking through the airport full of people, and you're just like, you do not understand. I just got as close to death and to living all at the same time that you're ever going to experience. And everything I've done since then, every workout I've done, every race I've done, everything I've done has been easy.
Wow.
Like I can freaking just like fall asleep in an airport, laying on the ground with no blanket, nothing like, and it's just like all of a sudden discomfort is not uncomfortable. So that it was worth it. Like it was really hard, but totally reinvented my idea of discomfort and what the human body is capable of.
Fascinating. When did you do that? When was that?
That was in August.
Okay. And would you ever do it again?
I've thought about it.
And it was 1 week.
They've got another one. If you've been through that, they have another one that they do with hand-to-hand combat and weapons. And it's called Turning Steel. And I'm tempted to do that version of it just because I shoot and I hunt anyways. And I'd like to do the upgraded version that involves maybe dealing a little bit more closely with death. So
you're an interesting guy, Ben. What's next for you for the next 5 years? If you're thinking, where do I want to be in 5? Will you still be doing what you're doing? Will you still be doing the obstacle stuff? Will you still be traveling to London to talk to people? Or does
I love to travel the world. I love to speak. Sometimes I take my kids with me. I've been speaking more. And it's just different than podcasting, right? Because with podcasting, you're just talking in front of a mic. And even though, like I mentioned, I am introverted, when I speak, I'm acting anyway. So it doesn't matter. Like that's my version of just like being in theater, being on stage. So I get a kick out of speaking, and I'd love to continue to do that. I'm
I really want to build up my homestead and learn a lot more about raising and rotating chicken crops and goats, and spending a lot more time out in our garden because it's gotten a lot bigger and my wife is going to need a lot of help with it. Just like learning how to live and take care of the body from a sustainable agriculture standpoint. That's really important. And then my kids, my kids are kind of my life. I've got, every morning when I wake up and I do that heart rate variability measurement and just I'm lying there in bed, I say a prayer for my kids every single day. That somehow, I get emotional just thinking about my kids. But I want them to be amazing human beings who can change the world. And for me to teach them to do that, I have to be the strongest version of me. But it's amazing. Once you have kids, it changes your life's perspective. Like all of a sudden you have that ultimate responsibility to be able to create this vibrant, strong human being. And it's amazing. Like that's the most important thing for me is taking my two little boys, River and Taryn, and just basically helping them to make the world a better place.
Yeah, you're kind of creating the next generation, aren't you?
Yeah, it's a really weird feeling. It's spiritual and physical and life changing all at the same time.
It has big consequences, doesn't it?
It does. It's and it's fun too. I mean, it's a hell of a lot of fun to just have these two little guys whose lives you can form and shape, and know that if you do that the right way, whatever, they might find the cure for cancer, or whatever, they might set the next Olympic record for cycling, or there are different things that are important, but either way, it's really cool to have kids. So
and a challenge, right? Just when you think you figured it out,
and it's a challenge,
and you get something new, like a monkey wrench.
Like when I had kids 6 years ago, my business exploded, and I think that part of that was me getting that status as the personal trainer of the year, and that helped. But having kids also gave me a huge amount of purpose and direction in life. I did everything from like starting a trust to investing my money more wisely to paying closer attention to finances to I started drinking less and partying less. Like just all these things changed that really helped out.
Right.
So
speaking of drinking, you drink wine every day. Is that true?
I do have a glass of wine every day, so I time it.
So that's the last thing I would ever expect from you.
Yeah, I have wine, and I also have dark chocolate almost every day. And so I'm a fan of putting those type of glucose increasing foods into your body when your body is going to partition those into muscle tissue most effectively, when you're most insulin sensitive, and when the activity of something called your GLUT4 transporter is most active. And that's always post-physical activity. So what I do, the way I structure my life, is morning is a time for parasympathetic nervous system movement, rest and digest. You take a crap, you do yoga, maybe you do some sauna, you go on a walk, you get some sunshine. You do everything that's involved with easing the body into the day. So I don't do a WOD or like a hard run or hard lifting or anything like that in the morning. But then in the afternoon, your body temperature peaks, your reaction time peaks, your post-workout protein synthesis peaks, meaning your ability to be anabolic and build muscle after workout, and your carbohydrate sensitivity peaks in terms of your ability to be able to do okay with carbohydrates. So most of the time when I do my wine, I've worked out at some point between 4 and 6 p.m., and my wine is pre-dinner. So I have a nice glass of wine, and after you've finished a workout, you may have experienced this, it's a lot easier to spin the dials in your brain with a glass of wine than it is after you've got a tummy full of food. So I have that glass of wine, I get nice and relaxed. Sometimes I have a little bit of chocolate or dessert before dinner, because again, I'm in that really insulin sensitive state. Right. And then at some point in the next 20 minutes to 2 hours, we actually sit down to dinner. But yeah, I have a glass of wine every day.
That's wild, man. That's fantastic.
I just time it.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've got it down to a science. So, but that's fantastic. I always ask everyone here a few questions at the end. So I'm going to ask you if you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old Ben and give that young man a bit of advice. What would you tell him to do?
Oh, that is a good question. I would almost say skip the last year of college, but I think
the master's degree.
Some of that education was useful and came in handy from a science standpoint. So, man,
I married my college sweetheart. I traveled the world with her for a long time before we had kids. I was pretty happy about most of the decisions that I made when I was 20. And I'm trying to think of any regrets or any advice that I would have given myself. I would say, returning to what we talked about with like biomarkers, with cortisol, with health, I wish I would have known about that stuff earlier, right? That exercise goes way more than skin deep, and that taking care of your body goes way beyond what you look like in the mirror, right? Because when I was 20, I was bodybuilding. I was flexing in front of the mirror for 30 minutes every night, and my focus was on how good I looked in my underwear.
Right.
And I didn't have very good sex drive. My body fat was at 3%, but there was something going on, right, hormonally, when you dip into that tank too many times from an exercise standpoint. So if anything, I think for my health, for anti-aging, for my athletic career, I would tell myself to figure out how to relax, right? Sleep more, de-stress. I don't think they had heart rate variability measurement tools when I was 20, which makes me feel really old. But I would say, quantify, figure out a way, whether it's deep breathing or, daily journaling or some kind of a way to actually keep your finger on the pulse of how you're really doing from a recovery and a de-stressing standpoint. I wish I'd have known that stuff earlier, because when you're 20, you're bulletproof. You can handle a lot of exercise, right? Like you can absorb a lot of weight and a lot of movement. But I think I would have accomplished more as an athlete and probably gone through a little bit less stress if I would have known at that point. Measure, relax, de-stress, focus on recovery, right? Like all the things that you learn as you get older and your body starts to fall apart.
Right. No, it's good advice. On that same note, what's the best advice you've ever received over the years? I know you've said you've not been a mentor fan, but or something that you've heard, whether it was business or personal, or even from a training perspective, where it kind of resonated with you.
How important breath is. Not just to the activation of those components of your nervous system, but also just to saturating your body with oxygen and also getting yourself into whatever state you want to be in. So breathing is a huge part of every week for me right now. And I don't remember where I first heard or learned that breathing is so important. There's a variety of books out there that I read, like
Karate Kid, maybe.
Yeah, Body, Mind, Sport by John Douillard, Running on Air by Bud Coates, yoga and the concept of deep breathing and also warrior breathing in yoga. But I do things like I've got a power lung in the glove box of both my cars. And when I'm driving in traffic or when I'm driving anywhere, I'll do sets with the power lung. So 10 sets of 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out.
This restricts your breathing
to train my lungs, right? Okay, right. When I go on walks, I do hypoxic sets where I'll hold my breath for as long as possible if I'm walking, say, like 2 miles, and I'll try and repeat that 2 or 3 more times over the course of those couple of miles. I do the deep, nasal breathing. I'll use that alternate left-right nostril breathing sometimes when I'm stressed. I do hypoxic breathing underwater. I do in the morning after my yoga session, that warrior breathing, that power breathing. During that Kokoro camp that I talked about, we did a full hour of that, of hyper-oxygenation, where we weren't blowing off CO2, but we were breathing in a ton of oxygen, and we got into these deep trance-like states. It was really amazing by manipulating breath. Right. The state that we could get into. So I think getting in touch with your breath and learning the importance of breathing is super duper important, but I don't remember where I first heard how important breathing is.
Okay, that's a very good one.
Yeah,
that's a very good one. Last question to the 20-year-old that's listening to us, from around the world that wants to be like Ben, or wants to do what you do, whether it means make a business out of this. What do you tell them? What kind of advice would you give them?
We already went over some of that.
Yeah, no.
Put the time in the trenches, right?
But nobody wants to do
lazy.
that, right?
Do the hard thing first. Produce every day. And if I could rehash those things, when you begin to organize your life and write down what it is that you're going to accomplish each week, categorize those for each day, like I described. But when you do that, you'll begin to identify patterns. As you read through the day, you'll see the things that you dread, the things that are tough for you. Don't wait until after you've cognitively exhausted yourself with email and responding to other people's problems and Facebook messaging and even a hard workout, frankly, until you've gotten that thing out of the way, that thing that's hard to produce, that thing that you dread. You do that hard thing first,
and then you do it consistently, right? A big part of my work, like this book that I wrote, it's 470 pages long. But it doesn't seem like it was that hard to write because I wrote for like 30 minutes every morning. But I did that for a year. And I think that a lot of young people want stuff too fast. Again, I feel really old when
by
I say
saying that.
young people. But want stuff too fast and don't realize the power of consistency, right? I figured that out for my body too. Like I'm really good working out every single day. That's another thing that DNA or that genetic testing found for me was I'm a fast recoverer. Right, like I don't do well with big blocks of training, 3 hours a day and pushing my body and then doing the long rest periods, right? Like 7 days off or 7 days on, 3 days off, right? My body does really, really well with 365 days a year doing something every single day. Right. And the same can be said from a productivity and a work and a success standpoint, right? It's not about these huge blocks of work followed by rest. I think a better approach is just consistently working every single day, doing the hard thing every day, and then just producing with excellence and putting this stuff out there that really benefits people.
Yeah, so. Create something every day. That's a really good takeaway from this. Yeah, and do the hard thing first.
Create something every. Thank you for taking my last 2 minutes and putting it into 4 words. Create something every day. Exactly.
Ben, you're a really fascinating guy. There's so many different holes we could just dive down for even further. So we'll have to do that some of the time. How can people get a hold of you? Is it straight to the website? Is that the best? Are you a Twitter guy, Facebook guy?
BenGreenfieldFitness.com.
Okay.
It's a good way to find me.
And that's got everything, right?
Yep.
Okay. And you'd be traveling the world? Like, can people see you in different places, find out where you're going to be?
Yeah, exactly. I talk about that on my podcast. I'm headed to Tel Aviv after this. My wife will meet me over there on Sunday. We're going to do like a bunch of videos and audios down there looking at the nutrition and the wellness scene in Israel.
Okay.
So,
fantastic.
And then we'll hopefully, I don't know, there'll be something valuable for somebody about falafel or hummus or something, I'm sure. But yeah. BenGreenfieldFitness.com.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks so much for coming. I appreciate it. It's been very eye-opening. I'm trying to think if I can make it through that Navy SEAL week.
You can do it.
Jesus, man.
It's all mental.
It's all mental, right?
It's all mental. It's all mental. There were some people that did it that were not incredibly fit, but there's a team there to carry you. And when the going gets tough, like they help you get through it. And you don't have to be the fittest. I was not the fittest guy there. But the mental strength really, really helps.
Right, and now that you know you've done that, everything else is easy.
Everything is easy.
That's crazy.
Yeah, knock on wood.
That's shocking.
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. As we say on London Real, it's about the journey. You're on one right now, and you're continuing. So I wish you all the best.
Cool. Thanks for having me on, man.
All right, man. Take care.
What we call reality is in fact nothing more than a culturally sanctioned and linguistically reinforced hallucination.
This week on London Real, we have movement artist Ido Portal.
So people think it's about handstands and, jumping on the rings and doing flips or whatever, when actually our work is way, way beyond that. It's a completely different and a huge paradigm shift in the way that you think about your practice and your movement and your body. We all have a body and we all move. We have no choice. The only question is how well are you doing it? And most people just don't have the user manual for their own machinery. Changing your dogma takes guts. I don't believe in planning. I believe in reacting. I'm not a messiah. I'm a thinker. I'm a teacher. I'm a mover. I'm being Ido. I'm just trying to handle myself in that way and be genuine.
On Sunday, London Real presents Ido Portal. Just move.
Walk beside me. Don't walk behind me.